Have you ever asked yourself, in the middle of everything you have to do each day, what the true meaning of your life really is? That question often appears only for a brief moment, when you turn off your screen, lie down in bed, or sit alone in silence. Then you hurriedly return to the familiar routine, as if being busy enough could somehow erase that emptiness inside. Everyone has wondered about the purpose of life. Yet the more we try to be better, to be more positive, the more we sometimes feel estranged from ourselves. We hide our anger, swallow our jealousy, ignore our vulnerability, and believe that this is how we grow up. But it is precisely what we reject that quietly pulls us along. Jung pointed out that if we want to find meaning, we cannot just run toward the light. We need to turn back and look straight into the darkness of our own mind, the part we always hide. So what exactly is that dark side, and why can it lead us to our life's purpose? The journey into it is not comfortable, but very likely it is in the place you fear facing the most that the answers you've been searching for all along are waiting. 1. The shadow. When you begin to question the purpose of your life, sooner or later you'll touch a very private place inside yourself. The place where feelings you don't like to look at are stored. Not the moments when you're happy, strong, and kind to everyone, but the moments when you feel jealous, angry, irritated with yourself, and don't understand why. Have you ever felt that way? A friend shares a new success, and somewhere in your chest, there's a sharp little sting of discomfort. You smile and congratulate them, but later that night, you find yourself asking, what kind of person am I? Why am I jealous? Or there was a time you lost your temper with someone you love, said words that you wish you could take back the moment they left your mouth. Then you lie awake the whole night, tormented. Why am I like this? I never wanted to become this kind of person. Carl Jung called this area the shadow, the darkness within us. He wrote, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. What matters is, the shadow is not the same as evil. It is not a sign that you are a bad person. The shadow is made up of all the parts of yourself you do not accept. Jealousy, ambition, weakness, selfishness, the need for attention, the fear of being abandoned, even abilities, creativity, and inner strength you were once taught you shouldn't have. It is like a room where you shove everything unpleasant to look at, then close the door so no one can see. And over time, even you forget what's inside. Jung believed that in each of us, there is a conscious part, what we know, acknowledge, and are willing to look at, and an unconscious part, a deeper layer that holds memories, emotions, drives, images, beliefs that we don't recognize or don't want to accept. The shadow is a part of the unconscious. It does not disappear just because we turn our face away. On the contrary, the more we try to suppress it, the stronger it becomes, and the more easily it can control us from behind the curtain. Let's look at a very ordinary example. A mother always tries to be gentle and patient with her children. She has read parenting books, watched videos about positive parenting, and promised herself she will always stay calm. Yet after a long, exhausting day, when her child whines just a little more, she suddenly snaps and starts yelling. What follows are tears, guilt, and the conclusion, I'm a terrible mother. If she stops there, she will only see herself as bad. But if she dares to sit down and listen to her anger, she might discover another story. She is completely worn out, constantly putting everyone else's needs above her own, never daring to say no, never daring to ask for help. That anger is not just ugliness, but a warning signal. I'm overloaded. I need care. Seen this way, the shadow is no longer the enemy, but a part that is trying to tell her something, hoping she won't confuse this with some sin against her sacred role as a mother. The shadow works like this throughout our lives. It shows up in moments when we react too strongly compared to the situation, a small piece of feedback that makes us explode, an offhand comparison that feels like a deep insult. On the surface, we only see "I lost control." On a deeper level, it is often old wounds, rejected needs, and parts of ourselves we've never allowed to exist. Sigmund Freud, an important figure in the history of psychoanalysis, once divided the structure of the human psyche into three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is like the wild child inside us, only wanting to satisfy desires and seek pleasure without caring about the consequences. The superego is the moral voice, the rules and standards. The "I must be a good person, I must not be selfish." The ego stands in the middle, trying to reconcile the two. Jung started from that foundation, but took a different path. For him, the issue is not only controlling instinct and pleasing the superego. He is interested in whether we dare to look at, understand, and integrate the parts that have been pushed into the dark, instead of just keeping everything neat and proper on the surface. Jung asks, what happens if we truly turn inward and realize that even jealousy, fear, or ambition carries messages about who we are? A classic image to describe the shadow is an iceberg. The part you see above the water, tidy and bright, is what you call yourself. Friendly, hard-working, responsible, reasonable. But the part below the water is the immense mass that creates the gravity and direction of the whole iceberg. That is where the memories, emotions, untold stories, and other selves you have learned to reject are stored. The shadow is that submerged part. You may not want to look at it, but it still determines where you drift. This does not mean we should let the shadow do whatever it wants. Jung does not encourage us to live loosely according to every feeling. What he says is, if you are not conscious of your shadow, it will lead your life silently. You think you are choosing, but you are actually reacting. You think you are living right, but in fact you are only repeating unconscious patterns from the past. So how can you begin to recognize your own shadow in a gentle way that doesn't turn into self-torture? One simple yet powerful step is to learn to observe. Pay closer attention to the times you overreact, to the emotions you feel ashamed of or believe you shouldn't have. Jealousy, bitterness, shame, the urge to be superior, the fear of being abandoned. Instead of hastily suppressing or judging them, you can try pausing and asking, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What am I afraid of? What have I not allowed to exist in my heart all this time? Journaling is a very helpful tool, not to complain endlessly, but to create a safe space where you are allowed to be honest. You might write, today I felt uncomfortable hearing someone talk about their success. I know I'm supposed to be happy for them, but honestly, I was jealous. Sometimes, just acknowledging this can already lessen the tension inside, because when it is called by its true name, the darkness loses part of its power. You can also pay attention to the people or behaviors you absolutely cannot stand. Often, what we hate most in others is connected to a part of ourselves we don't want to see. If you are extremely irritated by people who like to show off, it may be that there is a part in you that also wants to be seen and recognized, but has been suppressed for a long time. If you can't stand people who are weak and always complaining, it may be that you have never allowed yourself to be sad, to lean on anyone. This does not mean that everything we dislike in others is secretly ourselves, but it is a good starting point for reflection. Is there some part of this that resembles me that I am rejecting? Most importantly, when working with a shadow, you need one attitude: non-judgment. Look at those feelings the way you would look at a frightened child standing in the corner of a room. If you only scold it, it will hide even deeper. If you soothe and listen, it will slowly step out. When you write down or recognize a feeling, you can add a simple sentence. I understand why I feel this way. I am learning to face it. Just that alone is enough for the heart to soften. Recognizing the shadow does not make you a bad person. On the contrary, it is the first step for you to become more authentic, more mature, and more capable of making conscious choices in your life. You begin to realize Ah, I am not only the calm, friendly one. I also have very sensitive parts, parts that yearn deeply, parts that are easily hurt. And from seeing the whole picture, you start to ask a deeper question. So, who am I really? When we are brave enough to look into the shadow, the real journey toward meaning begins. Because at that point, we are no longer searching for purpose as a beautiful slogan to hang on the wall. We start looking for it in the very pieces of ourselves we've hidden away. And the next question naturally arises. If the darkness is not just something to fear, but also a doorway, how can we step into it and converse with it without losing ourselves? 2. Facing and dialoguing with the shadow. In the previous part, we stopped at the question, if darkness is not just something to be feared, but also a doorway, then how can we step into it without losing ourselves? Jung's next answer is not just be stronger, but learn to face and dialogue with a shadow, slowly and honestly. Perhaps you've had the feeling that you're acting too much. At work, you're the professional, composed one. At home, you try to be kind and accommodating. Out in the world, you're cheerful and sociable. In each of those roles, you're doing your best. But sometimes, when you're alone, you suddenly think, among all these versions of me, which one is really me? Jung called those roles the persona, the psychological mask we wear to fit the expectations of others. It's not bad. We need a persona to live in society, to work, and to communicate. But if we spend our whole life inside that mask, then the shadow, the parts left behind, will drift farther from our sight while coming closer to the control center. That's why Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, you cannot find clarity just by trying to appear positive, gentle, and nice. True growth begins when you dare to look at what you have been trying to reject. Anger, shame, jealousy, the fear of admitting your real needs, not to feed them, but to understand what they are signaling to you. Imagine your soul as a house. The persona is the living room, neatly cleaned and bright, where you welcome guests, where everything looks fine. The shadow is the room whose door you often keep closed, the place where you put everything you don't know where else to put. Boxes of memories that hurt, desires you were once called selfish for having, dreams that others mocked. Over time, you don't even want to open that door anymore. You tell yourself, there's nothing there. This is my real home, the bright, tidy living room. But even if you never step into it, that room still exists. The musty smell can seep out. Sometimes the door bursts open and things come crashing down. Those are the moments when you lose control, explode, or find yourself overreacting to something small. If you just slam the door shut again, it will keep happening. But if one day you turn on the light and stand still in that room, you begin to do what Jung called making the darkness conscious. A vivid illustration is the story of Tony Stark, better known as the superhero Iron Man in the Marvel Universe. On the surface, he is a billionaire, a genius, a playboy, always joking, always acting like he doesn't care. His persona is very clear, the invincible man. But anyone who watches the films can see that beneath that shell is darkness, fear of failure, guilt, loneliness, wounds from childhood, and from his relationship with his father. When he hides only in the role of the cool billionaire, his life is a mess. It is only when he starts facing his fears, accepting responsibility, and acknowledging his vulnerability that he truly becomes a hero. Not because all his bad parts disappear, but because he understands himself better. Dialoguing with the shadow is like stepping into a dark room and turning on the light. At first, your eyes will hurt. You'll want to turn around and leave. Many people stop there. The moment they see a few ugly things, they rush to conclude, "I'm a terrible person." But if you stay just a little longer, you will see that the room is not only filled with trash, it also holds forgotten treasures, old dreams, talents that were once crushed, deeply human needs you never dared to voice. Today, some approaches in positive psychology and movements like positive thinking and the law of attraction often emphasize the power of positive thoughts, focusing on the good, repeating affirmations such as, "I'm okay," "I'm strong," "I'm happy," and trying to avoid negative thoughts so as not to attract them. These methods are helpful in that they can pull many people out of a spiral of pessimism and open up the possibility of thinking differently about their lives. But from Jung's perspective, thinking positively alone is not enough. If we use positivity as a coat of paint over corners that have never been touched, the rejected emotions are still there, still pulling the strings in silence. Jung is not against light. He simply reminds us that real light begins when we dare to shine it exactly where it's dark. So, concretely, what does dialoguing with the shadow mean? First of all, it is the art of pausing and paying attention. Next time you feel a strong reaction to someone, intense irritation toward a certain type of person, a particular comment, a specific behavior, treat it as an invitation. Instead of only judging what's outside, you can ask yourself, why does this hit me so deeply? What might I be afraid of here? Have I been like this before but no longer allow myself to be? In Jung's analysis, this phenomenon is called projection. We unconsciously push the parts we don't want to see in ourselves outward, then hate, judge, or become obsessed with them in others. Recognizing that you are projecting is not easy because the ego always wants to believe the problem is with them. But each time you can be a little more honest, you take one step inward, closer to the truth about yourself. You can practice this in very simple ways. For example, you are especially irritated by people who like to show off. You find them ridiculous, unbearable. Try writing, "I hate show-offs. What am I afraid of in them? Am I afraid that if I also show myself, I'll be criticized like they are? Deep down, do I also want to be recognized, but keep forcing myself to be modest, always afraid of being seen as attention-seeking?" Questions like that are not there for you to prosecute yourself, but to help you start hearing the very quiet voices inside. The need to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be yourself. Another form of dialogue is through writing. You can imagine the shadow as a part that has been pushed into the corner of the house, and then let that part speak. You might write, "If the jealous part of me could talk, what would it say?" Then let your hand write freely, without editing, without censorship. Sometimes you'll be surprised by the words that appear. "I just want to be the priority for once. I'm tired of always having to be the understanding one. I also want to be praised, to feel proud of myself." When you read it back, you don't need to merge with those words, and you don't have to believe everything. You simply need to acknowledge, "So there is a part of me that feels this way." That acknowledgement is the first step of healing. Importantly, dialoguing with the shadow does not mean you allow every emotion and impulse to spill unchecked into your outer life. Just like when you walk into a dark room, you don't smash everything. You turn on the light, look around, and rearrange things. You are still the one who decides how you will live, but this time with more information, more honesty. Instead of relying only on the small part of yourself you think is acceptable. If you worry, "What if facing all this makes me worse?" Remember, what you refuse to look at does not vanish. It only shifts into a form that is harder to control. Those who always try to appear gentle are often the ones who have occasional frightening outbursts. Those who insist they are never jealous are sometimes quietly eaten alive by feelings of inferiority. Facing your shadow does not make you worse. It makes you more truthful with yourself, and therefore less dragged around by unconscious reactions. Every time you dare to sit with a painful feeling and ask what it wants to say, you are doing shadow work, subtle work with the darkness inside. It doesn't need to become a complicated ritual. You only need to keep two things: a gentle curiosity and kindness toward yourself. Each time you do this, you pull a little more of the darkness into the light of awareness, and in doing so, you are less and less led by fate, without knowing why. Facing and dialoguing with the shadow is the path that brings you closer to the truth of who you are, not the person you try to perform, nor the terrible image you use to punish yourself, but a whole human being with both light and dark, both strength and fragility. And when you begin to see the whole picture like that, a new question naturally arises. If all of these parts are me, is there a way for them to stop pulling in opposite directions and instead work together to create a life that is more meaningful and profound? That is the next step, learning to integrate the shadow, so you not only understand yourself, but also discover your life's purpose from that very wholeness. 3. Integrating the shadow to find your life's purpose. When you've begun to dare to step into your own dark room, turn on the light, and listen to the forgotten emotions speaking up, a natural question appears. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Seeing your jealousy, anger, weakness, shame can bring a sense of relief because you're finally being honest, but it can also easily frighten you. If I accept all of this, will I become a worse person? That feeling is completely normal. We grow up in a world that constantly tells us to be a good person. Don't be selfish. Don't be angry. Don't be greedy. From childhood, we're praised when we are well-behaved, when we give way, and when we act properly. Almost no one teaches us how to face the ugly parts of ourselves without sentencing ourselves in the process. So it's understandable that you believe that to live well, you must eliminate every bad thing inside you. Jung, however, says something very different. I would rather be whole than good. For him, the goal of growing up is not to become a flawless moral resume, but to become a complete human being, knowing what is in you is light and dark, strong and weak, and living in harmony with all of those parts. Good here is often what is considered good according to outer standards. Whole is when you no longer have to live against yourself to achieve that good. Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming an individual. It sounds abstract, but you can picture it as putting scattered pieces of yourself back together into a complete picture, instead of clinging only to one piece. I must be gentle. I must be strong. I must be positive. You begin to realize you also have the piece that says, sometimes I am fragile. Sometimes I just want to give up. I deeply want to be loved and recognized. When these pieces are allowed to sit together, you don't become worse, you become more real. If in the previous part we talked about stepping into the dark room and turning on the light, then at this stage, we don't just stand and look. We begin to rearrange things. You no longer treat those boxes of emotion as garbage to be thrown away, but look at what is in them that needs to be kept, what needs to be mended, and what needs to be transformed. Let's take a very close example. Suppose you are someone who always appears generous. You give a lot, you're always ready to help, and you never say no to others' requests. Everyone praises you as kind, selfless, living for others. But deep down, every time you see your friends succeed, having better opportunities, you feel a bit of bitterness, a stab of jealousy. Immediately afterward, you scold yourself. How petty. I'm not allowed to think like that. If you stop at that judgment, you will continue to live a double life. On the outside, the good person, and on the inside, someone who always feels bad for never reaching some absolute ideal of goodness. But if you dare to sit with that jealousy, not letting it control your behavior, yet allowing it to speak, you might hear something like, I also want to grow. I also have my own dreams. I've spent too long living only to meet other people's expectations. At that moment, jealousy is no longer a stain, but becomes a signal. You're drifting away from your true path. It pushes you to look again. What do I really want? How long have I buried my own dreams out of fear of being called selfish? When you understand this, that bad feeling suddenly becomes a doorway to your deepest desires. Abraham Lincoln is a vivid example of how a person can carry profound inner darkness and still find a way to live and contribute. People often remember him as an upright, resolute president, a symbol of will and freedom. But if we look more deeply into Lincoln's inner life, we see a man who repeatedly reached the bottom of despair. Through private letters to his friend John Stuart in 1841, he admitted he was the most miserable man in the world, with periods of deep depression. Yet Lincoln did not deny or let that darkness swallow him. He transformed his private pain into a fierce desire to serve. Living with that inner hell forged in him a tremendous capacity for empathy, enabling him to understand the suffering of a divided nation and to lead the United States through a time of intense conflict. He did not defeat the darkness by denying it, but by continuing to live, to work, to choose while it was still there. In Jung's language, he did not try to become a good model according to some mold, but became a person deep enough to hold both light and dark within himself. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the concentration camps, had a perspective very close to this. He said that meaning does not come from avoiding suffering, but from how we respond to it. Jung would likely nod. Life's purpose is not born from keeping our life perfectly clean and uncracked, but from how we face the cracks, understand what they say about us, and keep living with that understanding. You can imagine the wholeness Jung speaks of as a symphony. If there are only high notes, the music becomes shrill and tiring. If there are only low notes, the music becomes heavy and dark. A piece of music that truly touches others always has rises and falls, tension and release. Your life is the same. Sadness, anger, jealousy, disappointment are not system errors, but what gives depth to the music of your life. The issue is not to eliminate them, but to learn how to let them blend into the whole, not dominating, not being silenced, but also not taking over. In reality, integrating the shadow is not some complicated ritual, but a series of very ordinary moments in which you choose to respond differently to yourself. Instead of saying, "I'm jealous, I'm awful," you might say, "I'm jealous," which means there is a part of me that longs for something. I'm going to find out what that part wants. Instead of, "I'm angry again, I really am a hot-headed person," you might try, "This anger is telling me that a boundary of mine has been crossed. I can learn a more mature way to protect that boundary." Instead of forcing yourself to forgive immediately, while inside you are still hurting, you can be honest. "A part of me is not ready to forgive yet. I won't let that part drive my whole life, but I respect it and give it time." To integrate the shadow means you no longer treat yourself as a battlefield. The good side fighting the bad, the positive side trying to defeat the negative. Instead, you treat yourself like a house that needs rearranging. Every part has its reason for being there. Your task is to understand that reason and then decide where it belongs and what role it will play. One very helpful question in this process is, what does this shadow part want to teach me? In some cases, asking your inner world directly is the most useful way. When you feel jealous, you can ask, what is it pointing to that is missing in my life? When you feel afraid, you can ask, where is it asking me to be careful? Or which wound is it reminding me needs healing? When you feel angry, you can ask, which boundary of mine is being crossed that I haven't spoken up about? These questions are not meant to justify every behavior, but to open a dialogue with yourself instead of just barking the order, "Shut up." Alongside that, self-compassion is indispensable. If you approach the shadow with a voice that says, "You're horrible, you must change right now," the shadow will only shrink back further and find ways to surface in places you don't expect. But if you say to yourself, "I'm seeing a part of myself that's not pretty, but it is still me. I will learn to understand and guide it," you are gradually becoming a steady host in your own inner home. You can also regularly ask yourself, what is my real motivation? Am I striving because I truly want to, or because I'm afraid of being judged? Am I saying yes because it's true to my heart, or because I'm afraid of being rejected? These questions pull you out of automatic mode, where persona and shadow are pulling against each other, and into a space of more conscious choice. And it is in this space that life's meaning begins to show clearly. You recognize what makes you feel alive, what core values you want to hold on to, what you can no longer betray without losing yourself. As you gradually integrate the shadow, you'll notice a subtle shift. You don't have to strain as much to prove who you are. You no longer need to be constantly positive to be loved, or always strong to be respected. You can say, I'm not okay, without feeling like a failure. You can admit, I also feel jealous sometimes. I also have very dark corners, without feeling so ashamed that you want to disappear. That is the sign of wholeness, when you are no longer afraid of yourself. And it is precisely from this place of wholeness that the question of purpose begins to change. It is no longer, how do I find a grand goal to prove my worth? But becomes, I, with everything I carry, light and dark, what do I want to offer to this life? Once you have touched that wholeness, you will start to know more clearly what you truly want, what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. But meaning does not stop at understanding. It only really grows when you dare to turn those realizations into action and dare to face the fear that always accompanies every important turning point in life. And that is the final threshold, the hardest challenge, the place where fear is no longer just a barrier, but a sign that you are moving closer to your own path. 4. Meaning from action and facing fear. By this point, you've probably begun to understand yourself a little better, no longer seeing the darkness as an absolute enemy, but as a part that needs to be listened to. And when the thought, I wish I dared to live true to what I've just realized, gently appears, almost immediately another layer rises. Fear. Fear of failure, fear of being mocked, fear of hurting others, fear of leaving your familiar comfort zone. It's exactly at this intersection that the question, who am I, slowly shifts into, do I dare to live as the person I've recognized myself to be? And that's when we need to honestly look at our relationship with fear. Does this feel familiar? You want to change something, but in the end, you step back just because of the whispers in your head. What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I'm not ready? You may have read many books, written down a lot of plans, even told others, I'm going to do it. But when it's time to actually take a step, your body freezes. You procrastinate, then blame yourself, then promise again, I'll do it tomorrow. Jung has a short but piercing line. Where your fear is, there is your task. He doesn't say stay away from fear, nor does he say wait until you're no longer afraid and then act. Jung points out that the very place you fear most, the very area you keep avoiding, is often where the greatest potential for growth lies. Fear is not a sign that says turn back, but more accurately, a signpost that says something important to you is here. In Jung's language, the journey of becoming a whole person, individuation, always passes through such thresholds. You can imagine each fear as a small gate on your life's path. On this side are old habits and familiar safety. On the other side is a deeper, more mature version of yourself. Stepping through or staying put is essentially a choice between the old me and the me who is growing. Life's meaning does not appear in your head, on paper, or through endless philosophical conversations. It truly comes alive only when you start acting according to what you've seen. Even if your hands still tremble, you can understand your shadow very clearly, understand your wounds and longings very well. But if you stop at understanding, your life doesn't change. Understanding is like turning on the light in your house. Action is each step you take through the rooms. If you turn on the light but stay standing still, everything remains where it was. So fear is not an enemy that must be annihilated, but a natural part of your nervous system, like an alarm. Every time you're about to do something that really matters to you, speaking your mind honestly, setting a boundary, trying a new direction, the alarm will ring. Careful, you might be rejected, you might get hurt. If you understand this, you'll hate fear less and start asking, what is this fear reminding me of? Can I listen to it, prepare better, and still move forward? Picture a thick morning fog. From a distance, the road ahead seems to vanish. If you wait for the fog to clear completely before walking, you might stand in one place forever. Only when you start taking steps does your view open up a little more each time. Fear is the same. It doesn't disappear before you move. It often softens once you've begun. In real life, this pattern repeats. J.K. Rowling was once unemployed, a single mother, living on welfare. She didn't write Harry Potter in a state of complete confidence. The fear of rejection and judgment was surely there, but she still wrote, still sent her manuscripts. Each time she did so, she stepped through a small threshold within herself, and that became the premise for us to one day enjoy a legendary work, meaning that every beginning, no matter how vague, can create miracles, or like Rocky Balboa in the films. What makes him special is not physical strength, but the fact that he falls again and again and still gets back up, facing the fear of not being good enough, not being worthy, without running away. You might think, those are famous people, I'm just an ordinary person. But every big threshold starts with small doors. For example, you want to learn an instrument, but in your head, a constant chorus repeats, I'm terrible, I'm too old to start. If I quit halfway, it'll be embarrassing. Or, each time this happens, you put your passion away and postpone it one more day. If this time you do it differently, recognizing, I'm afraid of being judged, afraid of seeing myself clumsy, and still sign up for a small class, allowing yourself to be wrong, slow, awkward. Then, in that very moment, you've sent yourself a new message. Fear no longer makes decisions on my behalf. Many philosophers like Plato and the Stoics place high value on reason, seeing the control of emotion as necessary for inner peace. From one angle, this is very valuable. It helps us not be swept away by passing feelings. Jung does not deny the role of reason, but goes further. He believes that maturity is not about muzzling emotions until they're silent, but about recognizing, listening to, and integrating them into a broader, a deeper sense of self. In this view, fear is no longer a system error, but part of an inner guidance system. So, what can you actually do with your fear? Step 1. Write it down. Choose something you truly want to do but have delayed for a long time. Then honestly answer, what am I most afraid of? Allow even the fears that sound ridiculous to appear. Fear of being laughed at, fear of disappointing others, fear of having no second chance. Then ask yourself, if the worst really happened, could I still go on living? Have I ever overcome something harder than this? You're putting fear back into its true size, from an invisible monster into a worry you can talk to. Step 2. Break the step down. Instead of demanding that you make one giant leap, choose a small action that makes you slightly nervous but is still manageable. Sending one email, going to one trial class, saying one honest sentence, keeping one unfinished draft but letting it exist. To outsiders, it may seem insignificant, but to you, it's a ritual of crossing the threshold. Each time you do that, you're saying to your shadow, I see your fear. I'm not denying it, but this time, I will be the one holding your hand and walking. Here, reason and emotion meet. Reason helps you plan and break down the risks. Your heart knows this matters for your wholeness, so it accepts that there will be some trembling. Small actions like this, repeated many times, create a quiet but steady kind of meaning. You begin to feel that you're living closer to your true self. You feel less like you're drifting through life and more like you're present in your own story. And then, when you look back, you'll see that your path is not a perfect boulevard, but a narrow trail opened by countless moments when you dared to face the darkness. Face fear and take one more step. That is your own path. No one else can walk it for you. From here, the question is no longer, do I have a purpose in life? But rather, how am I writing that purpose a little more each day? And perhaps this is also when you realize the journey with your inner darkness doesn't end when you become better, but continues as a way of living. Each day a little more honest, a little more courageous, a little more at peace with yourself. If you walk with Jung to the end of this journey, you might see this. Your life's purpose does not fall from the sky, nor does it lie in trying to become perfect according to any mold. It reveals itself through the way you face yourself, daring to look at the dark parts, daring to acknowledge the emotions you once rejected, daring to admit that you are more complex than the good person image you've been trying to perform. Jung does not demand that we be spotless and pure. What he cares about is whether you dare to become whole. Wholeness means you know you have both light and darkness, things you're proud of and things that make you feel ashamed. And instead of tearing yourself into two opposing halves, you learn to hold them together in the same heart. At that point, you no longer live just to please external standard, but begin to ask, with this real self, how do I want to live and contribute? To do that, you don't need a dramatic revolution. You only need to begin with very small movements, noticing a difficult emotion instead of blocking it, allowing yourself to be honest in a relationship, trying a new step even while you're still afraid. Every small action like that is one time you step out of autopilot mode and step closer to a meaningful life of your own choosing. As Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In the end, what matters is not that you have finished dealing with the darkness, but that you no longer abandon yourself in that darkness. Wholeness, not perfection, is the foundation that allows you to find and live your life's purpose day by day in the smallest choices. If you feel this video touches your own journey, please share your story in the comments. What is the darkness inside you trying to say? And what are you doing to walk alongside it? And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue walking together through deeper content on Jung, on psychology, and on the path of coming home to yourself.